Even among athletes, there are some who stand out a little too much. So, do you ever think about them and wonder why they're famous at all? They're not bad players, but not as good as we've been told. And although they might not be as well known as the GOATs of their sport, they're still loved. So in today's video, let's talk about the top 10 most overrated athletes in history. Starting off with number 10, Alex Rodriguez. Alexander Emmanuel Rodriguez, also known as A-Rod, comes in at number 10 on the list. He used to play baseball and was a pretty well-known player in the MLB. If you're a fan of the sport, then there's no way you haven't heard of him and all that he's accomplished. His records on the field were pretty cool, and there's no denying that the man was very talented, although we agree that he might have been considered better than he actually was. And sadly for him, it was his drug use that caught our attention and suddenly got his name in every sports magazine. Apparently, he'd been taking them to boost his athletic performance and do better in his games. After that, a lot of his fans were so disappointed and ashamed that they went online and started calling him a cheater. Up next at number 9, Grant Hill. Grant Henry Hill is third on our list of basketball players and ninth on the list of the most overrated athletes.
Hill got it away from three-quarter court. Got it! Grant Hill banks it in.
Even though he's one of the most overhyped NBA players in the United States, he's also one of the most talented players to ever play the game. In fact, he was so skilled and wanted by the Orlando Magic that they paid him $73 million throughout his 7-year contract. He did score at least 20 points per game for 5 years in a row, but he hasn't done that in any of the last 11 years of his career. And even though he's got great fundamentals and was a player until he was 39, it's hard to call him a star. If anything, he's a star whose light started to fade long before we noticed. So even the best players are sometimes praised too much. Moving on to number 8, Lance Armstrong. Lance Edward Armstrong is the only athlete from this sport to make this list. To be clear, he's an American who used to ride bikes professionally and was a big name in the world of road cycling. Everyone who rides a bike has heard of this guy. Not only that, he's won the Tour de France 7 times, so that makes him someone who's loved by many. But here's sadly the catch, and one that really made all his fans feel like fools. In other words, Lance had been fooling us and also the rest of the cycling world for years by using drugs to improve his performance. Because of this, his records and accomplishments were erased, and he lost all of his fame and glory instantly. It was heartbreaking for us to find out that one of our favorite athletes had been doing this. Now for number 7, Pete Maravich. Peter Press Maravich, who is known as Pistol Pete, comes in at number 7 on our list of the most overrated athletes. We looked up to and loved him because we thought he was one of the best American shooting guards in the history of the NBA. There wasn't a single shot that he saw that he thought he couldn't take, making him the first volume shooter. He's known as a legendary scorer, but anyone who averaged more than 21 shots per game would be. Not just this, but he even made 44.1% of his shots from the field. His story is that he was perfect from anywhere inside half court, but with that percentage, he might have been better off just shooting layups. So he didn't get to the top ranks, even though he was a good player. Not to mention at number 6, Matt Leinart. Matthew Stephen Leinart is an American football quarterback who is ranked as the 6th most overrated athlete. Since he was in college, Matt had been the most popular person who had the most fans. He was also the best player on the field.
David Kirkman in the backfield. Leinart rolls, throws deep, got a man! Touchdown!
This good-looking, strong guy was known for his accurate throws that went more than 80 yards. Plus, he was a very good leader. But despite how hard he worked and how much he cared about football, he did become an overrated quarterback. Let's not forget to talk about number 5, Andy Roddick. Did you really think we wouldn't add this guy to the list? Andrew Stephen Roddick, who's ranked 5th, was the best tennis player of 2003. Even though his backhand wasn't very good, that didn't stop him from playing against the best players in the world and becoming the champion. Now that was probably the only reason why he became more and more well-known. Not just this, but he also played tennis with some of the best players of all time when he was younger, and his fan base stretched to almost every corner of the world. But many of us still believe that he was way overhyped and that other than his service and some aggressive ground strokes, he doesn't have the whole package. Coming up at number 4, Brett Favre. Okay, so he's the last NFL player on our list today. Brett Lorenzo Favre is a former American quarterback who played in the NFL. He's ranked as the 4th most overrated athlete. Aside from that, this talented player led the Packers to their only known Super Bowl win, so we're definitely not saying that he doesn't deserve credit for that. In fact, he is so well known that ESPN often talks about his legendary career, even though his stats don't look that great. He's one of the most praised and overrated players of all time. So yes, while it's easy for him to get into the Hall of Fame and some of his records will never be broken, putting him in the same conversation as the best quarterback of all time is a stretch. Aside from being a diva, he has a 13-11 record in the playoffs, a passer rating of 86, and he's never led the league in passing. Even though he had some good numbers, he couldn't be the best because he also had some average ones. Next at number 3, Anna Kournikova. It's a known fact that when it comes to being overrated, skills aren't the only thing that matter. How someone looks is pretty important too. Anna Sergeyevna Kournikova is a Russian professional tennis player who's seen as a rising star not because of how well she played, but because of how pretty she is. Not to mention how much attention she gets from the media and public, and the fact that she's so famous on TV is a given of course. So it's really not surprising that she's on this list, considering that she's thought to be one of the most beautiful tennis players of all time. And because of all the attention she got for her looks, she decided to focus on TV and modeling more instead of the sport. Let's also talk about number 2, Shaquille O'Neal. Is there anyone who hasn't heard of this name? Yes, that's how famous he is. But by now, you probably already know how overrated and popular this American NBA superstar is. Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal is known as one of the best point scorers in the NBA, but he's mostly known for his huge height of 2.16 meters. It was funny because a lot of people referred to him as the bully because of his size and how he used to tower over others. Unlike the other people on the list, most of us agree that Shaq is the most overrated athlete in the world. Some say that he's never won a championship without the help of a superstar guard, and even though his power game was great, he wasn't an all-rounder at all. And finally, at number 1, David Beckham. We don't think it's necessary to even introduce the person who's number 1 on our list because David Robert Joseph Beckham, or DB7, is a name everyone knows. This English football player is the best example of someone who's both talented and good-looking, but despite all that, there's no denying that he's also the most overrated athlete in the world. He wasn't the best player on the field, he was one of the best. In fact, he came in 2nd place for the FIFA Player of the Year award twice. That's pretty cool. But we shouldn't forget that he's also considered one of the world's most attractive men. This again proves our point that we mentioned earlier. Looks are a huge factor in being overhyped. Not only that, but his hair gets more attention than his records and accomplishments. There are a lot of us here who are still crazy about him and would do anything to be near him for sure. Well, that's a wrap for this video. So which player do you think is the most overrated? Let us know in the comments below. Also, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. We'll see you in the next one.